We've got a really great guest right now. We've had a good guest lineup this morning, huh, Robin?
Oh, yeah.
5 minutes after 10 o'clock in the studio, John Saucer is here. He has a book that has an unusual title, but it is such a fascinating book and such, maybe, is the word unique appropriate, a unique look at the Civil War. The title is, and he's going to correct me just a little bit in case I get it wrong.
No problem.
And we ob Jubilee, and I didn't pronounce anything wrong, I don't think. The 1st South Carolina Volunteers. Let me just tell you what I know from John. He was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the infantry of the U.S. Army, not during the Civil War. We'll tell you about that. He served in the Federal Republic of Germany for 3 years, where he was promoted to captain. He is obviously a very diligent, is that a good word? Historian, obviously talented as an author. His book again, And We Ob Jubilee, the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, the 1st black regiment in the Union Army during the American Civil War. He is also one of the featured authors at the 2013 Book Feast happening over at the Marion County Public Library headquarters here on East Silver Springs Boulevard. That will be April 13th. 2 segments ago, Sandra Poucher was here, also one of the authors that will be at the Book Feast, and we'll be featuring authors from the Book Feast in the upcoming days as we get closer to April 13th, thanks to Lee Schwartz over from the library. John Saucer, thank you for coming in here. You have put some time into this book.
Well, I will say this. It has taken a long time. I never thought something like this would finally come to fruition, but it just began with an idea about from another different venue right here, but one thing leading to another, and before you know it, man, the idea is now in book form and right here, and it's just something there that I'm just ever so glad there that I was finally able to do it.
Wow. First, help me with the title. Did I say it right?
That's close enough.
Close enough. How would you say it?
And we ob Jubilee. You know, it's slave dialect. I don't claim to be perfect in it, but you know, the word naturally means of, and it is from a poem that I came across, and eventually, but slowly but surely, just reading over it, I thought it'd be, you know, the last line of one of the stanzas. I thought would be just totally perfect for it because of just the way. Just the historical meaning behind it is to me is just so powerful.
Right.
Just bringing out this 4 simple little words right there, the meaning behind it, and everything that goes into it, that which the slaves had to endure during this time frame in our history. And so therefore, I decided, hey, let's go for it. And all I had to do is just add, of course, the name of the group right there, and you have the title right there in front of you.
So what is your background that led to your... I don't know if fascination is the right word, but I'm going to use it, and if it's not, you can correct it. But what led to your fascination with this topic?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's what the old adage goes that, you know how one thing leads to another here. My family goes back, you know, to the Civil War. I have learned, you know, at least on the part of my mother's side.
Okay.
And of course, I had a Civil War ancestor on the Union side, and that I always had known about. But unfortunately, I never really knew anything, you know, the details of his unit.
Okay.
And one day, years ago, I was visiting a cousin of mine, also a descendant of this ancestor right here, and she showed me some. Campaigns of this unit called 107th Ohio Volunteer Infantry, and when I found out this unit had been involved in the big battles of Gettysburg and Chancellorsville, man, I just about flipped.
Wow.
When I was a little boy, I was a big-time advocate. I totally loved the Civil War. Just whatever it was, man, I gobbled it up.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up here in Ocala.
Okay.
Born and raised. And like I said, I thought I was going to go ahead and write a regimental history of this unit right here.
Right.
And along the line, I, you know, like 2 or 3 years later, I came across another unit that just happened to be the unit of a Confederate ancestor of mine. And I was just totally thrilled about the fact that I had never known about this, you know, my paternal great-great-grandfather on the Confederate side, that I decided to switch topics and started writing about him. And over the years, you know, researching it, I finally came across the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, and as I got more and more into the area in which my Confederate ancestors unit was involved, the more I learned about this, and the more it really intrigued me. And I thought, my gosh, this is fascinating, because very, very few things have been written about black Civil War units.
Okay.
And before I knew it, I was getting more into it. And
Was your ancestor black?
no, sir.
No?
No, sir.
I mean, is that an unfair question? I mean, you don't look black.
No, sir. No, sir. Both my Civil War ancestors were white. One was a German immigrant, and of course, like I say, one was a Confederate soldier. There were no black Confederate soldiers, and of course, until the end of the Civil War, which was only about 1 month's worth, and they were only in the basic training at that time.
Can I ask a question? You obviously are eons above me when it comes to Civil War knowledge. So,
Well, I know. I'll just say I know a few things. I'm not perfect, but I do know a few things.
But forgive me if I sound like a kindergartner or a pre-kindergartner with this question. But would a black soldier in the Union Army have been a former slave? In other words, were there slaves up in the northern states that were freed first or something?
By the time of the Civil War, there were no more slave states, shall we say, north of the Mason-Dixon line. There were, of course, several slave states, to include Massachusetts, that was a slave state, for a while. But for so many years after the Revolution, the state legislatures in those respective states ended it. And the only reason why you continue to have slavery in the southern states naturally because that one little word that just resonates even today, cotton. And so therefore, it was just one of those things right there that they deemed it was just one of those that they had to have. And of course, naturally, it was along racial lines that they always thought that that the black man, aka from those from Africa, were inferior, and therefore this was just the perfect thing for them to do, and they were, shall we say, easy pickings. But slowly but surely, public opinion started to change, and even though may not have been changes against shall we say, overt, racial, discrimination against them, but it's just the idea of slavery was starting to change. And of course, those in the southern states, who had slavery, and even in the Midwest, like Missouri, Kansas, for example, they were starting to feel enclosed upon, and therefore that their entire way of life and was being threatened. And, of course, one thing leading to another, and you had the Civil War.
Wow. And did you write the book because of your personal connections to the two sides of the Civil War, or did you write the book to maybe help us understand better what was going on with
pure Civil War history, sir? I mean, that was the force behind it. But of course, you're always going to have your greater themes too, like what you just got through alluding to there, that one can talk about. But the driving force was just pure Civil War history.
So are the men? I'm assuming it was all men, right? In this,
naturally, yes, sir.
Okay.
But of course, there were a few women who disguised themselves as men so they could fight because that's what they wanted to do.
Black women?
No, sir. They were all white women who disguised themselves. As my understanding of it, they were in Union Army units. I've never ran across any women who were from the southern side who disguised themselves as men to fight in the Confederate Army.
Oh, really? Okay. So now the cover depicts a black soldier.
Yes, sir.
And he's a Union soldier.
Yes, sir.
You can see how I'm real cautious with what I'm saying here. And the first black regiment is represented by the cover, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So did you get to know specific individual soldiers by your research? I mean, did you find things about these people? And are their descendants living here somewhere?
In my research that I've done so far, there is nothing of that nature that I have ever run across. Naturally, I looked through everything that I could find about this unit in every book that I have run across about black soldiers in the Civil War, and also the unit, the first unit commander of this regiment right here, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, whether in his own writings or those who had written about him. And there was nothing that anybody that came across that talked about having descendants. Now, I'm sure people like that do exist, but unfortunately, in my research, I have yet to run across any. I'm not saying I won't in a future endeavor, right. But as of this point right now, I have yet to.
Were the job opportunities for the freed black men and women up in the north scarce?
I will say this: it all depended upon the individual, white people. I mean, there were no laws governing about, anti-discrimination or anything of that nature, and therefore, those who achieved any success was through their own sheer grit and determination, and of course, what they were able to achieve in the environment in which they lived. And now exactly how many did that, naturally, I have no idea. I am not an expert in that area, but yes, it did happen. But unfortunately, there were plenty who, of course, who did live up there, but that they were held back, because of the attitude of the white people at that time, even in the northern states. I mean, it was very overt, even though they did not like slavery. Right. They didn't care to be around those blacks. That is for a lot of them. I'm not saying not all, but it was, according to my research, and naturally it was a good portion of them.
Was there any preconceptions that you had from a historical perspective that were changed when you delved into certain areas for your research?
I will say this here: just by studying everything that I have done. And of course, in my own experience, when I served in the Army, whether on active duty or in the National Guard, that it has given me a much broader, a much better understanding of blacks serving in the military, the historical relationship, and how it has offered them opportunity to advance. Whereas that is, of course, nationally, I'm referring to before anti-discrimination laws came into place, and their contributions, to the security, the safety of this country, both before and after, the civil rights laws came into place and so forth. Yeah. And it's really gives me this hats off mentality to those who had served, while they had to endure discrimination, and those who continue to serve, to the present day.
Wow, well said. Nicely said.
Thank you.
You've got a great voice, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did the soldiers in the Civil War, both North and South, drafted to serve, or did they volunteer? I mean, this says volunteer here, right?
Right. Correct. Now, I will say this: that was it was the name of the unit. It was, given to the to this group who were, shall we say, brought together initially by the commander of the Union occupation forces in the Sea Islands of South Carolina. And basically, just to give you just a little quick background right here, at the beginning of the Civil War, President Lincoln said that he was going to announce a blockade of all southern ports. And the only way they're going to be able to have a blockade was they're going to have, of course, naturally, ships all over the place. But that, was slowly but surely as they were able to build up their, their wartime ability. And the only way they were going to have, effective blockade, they were going to have ports in which they would have to have a base of supply. And therefore, they were going to have areas that were going to have to take over the Confederates, and most likely islands, which are natural places easy to defend. And of course, the first one that they went to was the Port Royal area, which is about halfway between Charleston, South Carolina, and of course Savannah, Georgia. And the ensuing aspect of it, because I can really draw this thing, I'm trying to make it very, very short. Initially, there were thousands of Union soldiers involved in this operation, but unfortunately, during the course of battle, they need reinforcements after a lot of people are killed and wounded, and therefore they had to draw down from those who were not in any action. And the Union commander who was involved in this time, his name was Major General David Hunter. He was given the task of having to take over the Confederate, seaport bastions of Charleston or Savannah. But unfortunately, these seaports were heavily guarded, and with the amount of men that he had on hand, and with all the areas that he had to maintain, not only in South Carolina but island enclaves in Georgia and Florida, he didn't have enough. And therefore, there's no way he could have gotten more from the more reinforcements, and therefore he's with all the different black men that are available, he wanted to to use them to add to his own soldiers that he had. But unfortunately,
And does that explain how black men from South Carolina fought for the Union Army?
this in a basic sense, this is like I say in a nutshell, because there's so much involved.
Sounds like there's a lot. I mean, the book is
you're
huge.
You're right. But to answer your question about you talking about the draft and name the volunteers,
right.
that when he initially tried to recruit, unfortunately, very very few did it, because they were also being told by a lot of white soldiers there that if they did do this, they would be sent to Cuba, and Cuba at this time also had a slave environment. And of course, they were, according to what I understood, were a lot worse to be there as a slave than in the southern states. But what he did eventually, he initiated his own draft of the Sea Island freedmen in the area of Port Royal. And that was, shall we say, even though there was no official draft of the federal government, this was something that he was able to do at this time to bring them all together to begin a unit, even though it was not officially recognized by the federal government. And this was also another one of those, shall we say, a hot button issue.
Yeah.
Because of having black soldiers in the Union Army, that wasn't a very popular thing at the time. Also.
Oh my goodness. So in the course of the book, do we get to know them? I guess that's. I mean,
there are a few.
I mean, individual names and thing, and something about them and what their lives were like.
The very few people whose names that I've run across, they're based upon the individuals who left writings. For example, like Thomas Wentworth Higginson. He was the first commander of the formal unit that was when it was finally recognized by the federal government. And he had this one individual. His name was later Sergeant Robert Sutton. And there was another individual named Sergeant Prince Rivers. Even though these two gentlemen had been slaves, no formal education, they were very intelligent individuals. And because of their high IQs, he put them in important positions, for what he needed. And of course, both of them were also gave him lots of information besides other soldiers in his unit as to areas in which they would later go into in order to conduct certain kind of operations.
Wow.
Now, how were all of these historical writings preserved? Because you said that either Commander Pickens wrote things himself about that period, or people wrote things about him. How did all of the writings become preserved so you would have documents to draw upon?
Ma'am, the only way I can say that is that there were those, shall we call them, the descendants of these individuals. For example, once again, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, I believe it was his daughter that later on in life, she donated all his writings, a journal, a diary that he kept, letters that he wrote. He wrote back home to his wife. She donated them to Harvard University. He was also a Harvard graduate himself.
Oh my gosh!
And so therefore, if the people who wrote this information did not do it themselves, their descendants did it for them. Mm-hmm. And therefore, unfortunately, it was a boon in order for me to come across these things, because so much of this stuff, very little had been written about, or nothing had been written about before. And therefore, to me, it was a gold mine.
Wow. You are a gold mine, John.
Yes.
John Saucer is our guest. His book is called And We Ob Jubilee. John lives here in Ocala, was raised here in Ocala. Mm-hmm. The subtitle of the book, The First South Carolina Volunteers. It is the story of the first black regiment in the Union Army during the American Civil War. Fascinating stuff. The book is huge. It's 540-something pages long. John will be at the 2013 Book Feast over at the Marion County Library headquarters on April 13th. Right now, let's squeeze in a few phone calls. I know people have been wanting to say something to you, John. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. This is really a privilege. Captain, first let me say thank you for your service to our country.
You're welcome.
Sir, I have to warn you, I'm a Civil War buff, so
That's fine, sir.
this is like meat and potatoes for me. I love this stuff. Over 180,000 African Americans served in the Union Army. I mean, this was no small contribution. It was a magnificent contribution by those people that fought for their freedom and for our country. And just to kind of put this into context of people that, might be familiar with a little bit of popular culture, the movie Glory, which was about the 54th Massachusetts, which fought in South Carolina, the troops that the captain wrote about were the black soldiers that were already there when Matthew Broderick and his men arrived from up north. Those were the troops that were there already serving in the theater and conducting raids against the Confederates and trying to support the Union amphibious operation. So if you've ever seen the movie Glory, the troops that were raised along the coast of South Carolina were the black Union soldiers who were already there participating in the campaign. And I'll let somebody else talk, but this is really fascinating. And thank you again, Captain.
You're welcome, sir.
You shook your head. It sounds like you agree with what he said right there.
I do.
Yeah. All right. Well, you should meet each other. He's a smart guy, too. All right. Good morning. You're on there with John Saucer.
Good morning, Mr. Saucer. It's very interesting. Great to hear you. Had you ever talked to Mr. Pinckney Woodbury, or did you ever read the book here in Marion County, Struggle for Survival?
No, sir. Unfortunately, I haven't read that book yet.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. If you ever get a chance, you might want to pick up a copy of it. But it's funny that you were talking about the blacks in the South Carolina, New Orleans area. At that time, I guess a lot of them, they would call us South Carolina Geechees, but a lot of them now are having problems maintaining the property because there's very few of them that live on those little islands now. There's very few left, and they become so valuable until they can't even, I think it's like families are like less than 100 in some of them, and they were descendants of many of the soldiers that fought in the Civil War, and they moved to those islands, and they, developed their own language and stuff. I think Mr. Branch, I can't think of his name, but he writes a lot of historical stuff about those areas and stuff. But the ironic thing now is they're about to be wiped out because the taxes are getting so high until they can't afford to maintain their properties and stuff. So,
I remember that story, yeah.
Yeah, it's getting to be really bad there. Because of the property taxes, they're going to have to, many of them, the few families that's left on those islands, they're going to have to give them up, and there'll be a wealth of history and everything that's going to be gone. But it's great to hear from you.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do you want to comment on that before I go to the next call?
Go for it.
Go for the next call. All right. Good morning. You're on there with John.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Were the black soldiers compensated like the white soldiers for their service, with either pay or whatever it was? And like if they got lost in battle, would one of their loved ones get compensation?
That's one of those little tricky things right there that purely dependent upon the white officers that were in charge of the situation. Naturally, early on, there was no pay for performance, and even with the advent of the 54th Massachusetts, the first regiment of black soldiers from a northern state, it took them over a year before they were finally compensated for all the activities that they did.
Yeah.
And for the other soldiers right there, yes, it finally took an act of Congress, but they were finally compensated, and of course they received a lot of back pay.
Yeah.
Now, whether any of the families of these individuals, I'm sure that they were, but now that is not an area that I really looked into, but I can only tell you that, yes, to a degree, yes, I got no doubt it did take place.
Yeah. Are there any black Civil War soldiers in Arlington?
I got no doubt there are, sir.
Yeah.
But exactly to say who they are, I have no idea, sir.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let me squeeze in one more, and then we'll have to see you next time over at the library. Good morning. You're on the air.
Thanks, Larry, and Captain Marine Corps Sergeant Semper Fi.
Hoorah.
Hoorah. I just wanted to congratulate you on your hard work, and
Thank you,
also just reflecting on the last the pay. I guess the black soldiers, Frederick Douglass petitions Lincoln's White House over 100 times. Lincoln finally meets Douglass once or twice. Douglass says, I have a son that's a sergeant, one's a private. They're getting half of the pay of the white person. Lincoln makes a commitment. Could you comment on that, Captain? I'll hang up.
I will say this there at the time when Frederick Douglass's sons had served in the 54th Massachusetts, they were like all the other soldiers that volunteered for this unit right there. They volunteered and they went through what they did and they got paid, for what they did. Yes, talking about half pay. A lot of them initially they were offered $7 a month. Plus the fact they also had to pay for the uniforms, whereas the white soldiers were paid $13 a month, and they did not have to pay for the uniforms. This is just one of the aspects right there at this time right here in which those in Congress, when they created this law right here, talking in reference to the pay right here, that they had to continue to maintain this illusion, as I refer to it, that the black man was not to the equal of the white man, and therefore if you gave the black man the same pay as the white man, therefore this illusion that they were inferior would not hold water, and therefore just like one had seen in the movie Glory, that they refused the pay. They were not going to be treated like this, and until they received exactly the same as the white soldiers, they would refuse the pay. And of course, this went on until finally, over that year later, when Congress finally decided to make this happen, that they got what they had deserved.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
You have done
Gosh.
an awesome amount of work here. Is this your first book?
Very first one, sir.
Wow. And is there another one in the works?
I'm currently working on a second one right here. It's not Civil War history, but it's another one right here that I'm slowly but surely putting together, and hopefully, maybe by the end of this year, I'll have it done. But of course, like anything else, only time will tell.
Well, congratulations
Thank you, sir.
on the book, getting it done, the amount of work, the fact that it's a published book. Is available on Amazon and all those places?
At Amazon.com, Books a Million, other places that are on the internet that I have seen right there.
Do you have a website?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. When Hollywood comes knocking on your door, do you want to trust them with this story, or do you think they're going to ruin it?
Well, there's only one way to find out.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today. We will we'll see you at the library on the 13th. Everybody else, guess what? You will too if you go down to the library. John will be there with all of the authors at the 2013 Book Feast. It was an awesome event last year. Lee Schwartz introduced us to John. John actually called me yesterday. John looks like he could be related to me, by the way.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again,
You
please.
look like you could be related to me.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Might be
man.
those black relatives in our background. I'm not sure.
Hey, who knows?
Well, thank you for coming in. Fun.
You're welcome, sir.
Obviously a very knowledgeable man, and I'm looking forward to learning more from you.
Thank you very much for having me right here. I really, really appreciate it.
All right, we will take a little break, and we will be right back.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
Hi, this is Brad, one of the hosts of Winging It here on WOCA every Friday at 9 a.m. I want to take a moment to talk about a serious issue regarding aviation. In the next 5 years, the aviation industry is projected to have a shortage of commercial pilots, in part due to the lack of new pilots starting their flight training now. A pilot needs 2 to 3 years to get through their training and to build up enough flight time to be able to be hired. Now is the time to start training. Ocala Flying Club has started a scholarship for the youth of Marion County ages 17 to 24. The club will donate up to $4,000 towards a private pilot's license. This license will help get the student on their way to obtaining their commercial pilot license. Now, of course, the student does not have to have aspirations of becoming a commercial pilot. If they simply have a desire to obtain their private pilot's license so they may enjoy the adventures of flying, they may also apply for the scholarship. If this sounds like something you would be interested in, or if you know someone that would be, please contact me, Brad, or Ron at Ocala Aviation Services, 861-7484.